These are the names of the Israelites who went to Egypt with Jacob, each bringing his family members: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah; Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin; Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. 70 persons in all generated by Jacob's seed. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers, that whole generation. But the children of Israel kept on producing. They were prolific. They were very prolific, a population explosion in their own right. And the land was filled with them. A new king who didn't know Joseph. A new king came to power in Egypt who didn't know Joseph. He spoke to his people with alarm. There are way too many of these Israelites for us to handle. We've got to do something. Let's devise a plan to contain them, lest if there's a war, they should join our enemies or just walk off and leave us. So they organized them into work gangs and put them to hard labor under gang foremen. They built the storage cities, Pithom and Ramses, for Pharaoh. But the harder the Egyptians worked them, the more the children the Israelites had. Children everywhere. The Egyptians got so they couldn't stand the Israelites and treated them worse than ever, crushing them with slave labor. They made them miserable with hard labor, making bricks and mortar and back-breaking work in the fields. They piled on the work, crushing them under the cruel workload. The king of Egypt had a talk with the 2 Hebrew midwives. One was named Shiphrah and the other Puah. He said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the sex of the baby. If it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. But the midwives had far too much respect for God and didn't do what the king of Egypt ordered. They let the boy babies live. The king of Egypt called in the midwives. Why didn't you obey my orders? You let those babies live. The midwives answered Pharaoh, the Hebrew women aren't like the Egyptian women. They're vigorous. Before the midwife can get there, they've already had the baby. God was pleased with the midwives. The people continued to increase in number, a very strong people. And because the midwives honored God, God gave them families of their own. So Pharaoh issued a general order to all his people. Every boy that is born, drown him in the Nile, but let the girls live. The book of Exodus chapter 2. A man from the family of Levi married a Levite woman. The woman became pregnant and had a son. She saw that there was something special about him and hid him. She hid him for 3 months. When she couldn't hide him any longer, she got a little basket boat made of papyrus, waterproofed it with tar and pitch, and placed the child in it. Then she set it afloat in the reeds at the edge of the Nile. The baby's older sister found herself a vantage point a little way off and watched to see what would happen to him. Pharaoh's daughter came down to the Nile to bathe. Her maiden strolled in the banks. She saw the basket floating. She saw the basket boat floating in the reeds and sent her maid to get it. She opened it and saw the child, a baby, crying. Her heart went out to him. She said, this must be one of the Hebrew babies. Then his sister was before her. Then his sister was before her. Do you want me to go and get a nursing mother from the Hebrews so she can nurse the baby for you? Pharaoh's daughter said, yes, go. The girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter told her, take this baby and nurse him for me. I'll pay you. The woman took the child and nursed him. After the child was weaned, she presented him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son. She named him Moses, meaning pulled out, saying, I pulled him out of the water. Time passed. Moses grew up. One day he went and saw his brothers, saw all that hard labor. Then he saw an Egyptian hit a Hebrew, one of his relatives. He looked this way and that, and then when he realized no one was in sight, he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. The next day he went out there again. 2 Hebrew men were fighting. He spoke to the man who started it. Why are you hitting your neighbor? The man shot back, who do you think you are, telling us what to do? Are you going to kill me the way you killed that Egyptian? Then Moses panicked. Word's gotten out. People know about this. Pharaoh heard about it and tried to kill Moses, but Moses got away to the land of Midian. He sat down by a well. The priests of Midian had 7 daughters. They came and drew water, filling the troughs and watering their father's sheep. When some shepherds came and chased the girls off, Moses came to their rescue and helped them water their sheep. When they got home to their father, Reuel, he said, that didn't take long. Why are you back so soon? An Egyptian, they said, rescued us from a bunch of shepherds. Why, he even drew water for us and watered the sheep. He said, so where is he? Why did you leave him behind? Invite him so he can have something to eat with us. Moses agreed to settle down there with the man, who then gave his daughter Zipporah, meaning bird, to him for his wife. She had a son, and Moses named him Gershom, meaning sojourner, saying, I'm a sojourner in a foreign country. Many years later, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned under their slavery and cried out. Their cries for relief from their hard labor ascended to God. God listened to their groanings. God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw what was going on with Israel. God understood. Exodus chapter 3. Moses was shepherding the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. He led the flock to the west end of the wilderness and came to the mountain of God, Horeb. The angel of God appeared to him in flames of fire, blazing out of the middle of a bush. He looked. The bush was blazing away, but it didn't burn up. Moses said, what's going on here? I can't believe this. Amazing. Why doesn't the burn up? Why doesn't the bush burn up? God saw that he had stopped to look. God called to him out of the bush. Moses, Moses. He said, yes, I'm right here. God said, don't come any closer. Remove your sandals from your feet. You're standing on holy ground. Then he said, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, afraid to look at God. God said, I've taken a good long look at the affliction of my people in Egypt. I've heard their cries for deliverance from their slave masters. I know all about their pain, and now I've come down to help them, pry them loose from the grip of Egypt, get them out of that country and bring them to a good land with wide open spaces, a land lush with milk and honey, the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. The Israelite cry for help has come to me, and I've seen for myself how cruelly they're being treated by the Egyptians. It's time for you to go back. I'm sending you to Pharaoh, to bring my people, the people of Israel, out of Egypt. Moses answered God, but why me? What makes you think that I could ever go to Pharaoh and lead the children of Israel out of Egypt? I'll be with you, God said, and this will be the proof that I'm the one who sent you. When you brought my people out of Egypt, you will worship God right here at this very mountain. Then Moses said to God, suppose I go to the people of Israel and tell them the God of your father sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? What do I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. Tell the people of Israel, I am sent me to you. God continued with Moses. This is what you're to say to the Israelites. God, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob sent me to you. This has always been my name, and this I always will be known. Now be on your way. Gather the leaders of Israel. Tell them, God, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob appeared to me, saying, I've looked into what's being done to you in Egypt, and I've determined to get you out of the affliction of Egypt and to take you into the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, a land brimming over with milk and honey. Believe me, they will listen to you. Then you and the leaders of Israel will go to the king of Egypt and say to him, God, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us make a 3-day journey into the wilderness where we will worship God, our God. I know that the king of Egypt won't let you go unless he's forced to. So I'll intervene and hit Egypt where it hurts. Oh, my miracles will send them reeling, after which they'll be glad to send you off. I'll see to it that this people get a hearty send-off by the Egyptians. When you leave, you won't leave empty-handed. Each woman will ask her neighbor and any guest in her house for the objects of silver and gold, for jewelry and extra clothes. You'll put them on your sons and daughters. Oh, you'll be clean. You'll clean the Egyptians out. Exodus chapter 4. Moses objected. They won't trust me. They won't listen to a word I say. They're going to say, God, appear to him? Hardly. So God said, what's that in your hand? A staff. Throw it on the ground. He threw it. It became a snake. Moses jumped back fast. God said to Moses, reach out and grab it by the tail. He reached out and grabbed it, and he was holding his staff again. That's so they will trust that God appeared to you, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God then said, put your hand inside your shirt. He slipped his hand under his shirt, then took it out. His hand had turned leprous like snow. He said, put your hand back under your shirt. He did it, then took it back out as healthy as before. So if they don't trust you and aren't convinced by the first sign, the second sign should do it. But if it doesn't, if even after these 2 signs they don't trust you and listen to your message, take some water out of the Nile and pour it on the dry land. The Nile water that you pour out will turn to blood when it hits the ground. Moses raised another objection to God. Master, please, I don't talk well. I've never been good with words, neither before nor after you spoke to me. I stutter and stammer. God said, and who do you think made the human mouth? And who makes some mute, some deaf, some sighted, some blind? Isn't I God? So get going. I'll be right there with you, with your mouth. I'll be right there to teach you what to say. He said, oh, Master, please send somebody else. God got angry with Moses. Don't you have a brother, Aaron the Levite? He's good with words. I know he is. He speaks very well. In fact, at this very moment, he's on his way to meet you. When he sees you, he's going to be glad. You'll speak to him and tell him what to say. I'll be right there with you as you speak with him, as he speaks, teaching you step by step. He will speak to the people for you. He'll act as your mouth, but you'll decide what comes out of it. Now take this staff in your hand you'll use to do the signs. Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said, I need to return to my relatives who are in Egypt. I want to see if they're still alive. Jethro said, go, and peace be with you. God said to Moses in Midian, go return to Egypt. All the men who wanted to kill you are dead. So Moses took his wife and sons and put them on a donkey for the return trip to Egypt. He had a firm grip on the staff of God. God said to Moses, when you get back to Egypt, be prepared. All the wonders that I will do through you, you'll do before Pharaoh, but I will make him stubborn so that he will refuse to let the people go. Then you are to tell Pharaoh God's message. Israel is my firstborn, my son, my firstborn. I told you, free my son so that he can serve me, but you refused to free him. So now I'm going to kill your son, your firstborn. On the journey back as they camped for the night, God met Moses and would have killed him. But Zipporah took a flint knife and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' member with it. She said, "Oh, you're a bridegroom of blood to me." Then God let him go. She used the phrase bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision. Okay. God spoke to Aaron, "Go and meet Moses in the wilderness." He went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Moses told Aaron the message that God had sent him to speak and the wonders he had commanded him to do. So Moses and Aaron proceeded to round up all the leaders of Israel. Aaron told them everything that God had told Moses and demonstrated the wonders before the people. And the people trusted and listened believingly that God was concerned with what was going on with the Israelites and knew all about their affliction. They bowed low and they worshiped. Exodus 5, Moses and Aaron and Pharaoh. After that, Moses and Aaron approached Pharaoh. They said, "God, the God of Israel, says, free my people so that they can go hold a festival for me in the wilderness." Pharaoh said, "And who is God that I should listen to him and send Israel off? I know nothing of this so-called God, and I'm certainly not going to send Israel off." They said, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Let's make a 3-day journey into the wilderness so we can worship our God, lest he strike us with either disease or death." But the king of Egypt said, "Why on earth, Moses and Aaron, would you suggest the people be given a holiday? Back to work." Pharaoh went on, "Look, I've got all these people freeloading, and now you want to reward them with time off?" Pharaoh took immediate action. He sent down orders to the slave drivers and their underlings. "Don't provide straw for the people for making bricks as you've been doing. Make them get their own straw and make them produce the same number of bricks. No reduction in their daily quotas. They're getting lazy. They're going around saying, 'Give us time off so we can worship our God.' Crack down on them. That'll cure them of their whining, their God fantasies." The slave drivers and their underlings went out to the people with their new instructions, Pharaoh's orders. "No more straw provided. Get your own straw wherever you can find it, and not one brick less in daily work quota." The people scattered all over Egypt, scrambling for straw. The slave drivers were merciless, saying, "Complete your daily quota of bricks, the same number as when you were given straw." The Israelite foremen whom the slave drivers had appointed were beaten and badgered. "Why didn't you finish your quota of the bricks yesterday or the day before, and now again today?" The Israelite foreman came to Pharaoh and cried out for relief. "Why are you treating your servants like this? Nobody gives us any straw, and they tell us, 'Make bricks.' Look at us. We're being beaten, and it's not our fault." But Pharaoh said, "Lazy. That's what you are. Lazy. That's why you whine. Let us go so we can worship God." "Well, then go back to work. Nobody's going to give you straw. And at the end of the day, you better bring back in full your quota of bricks." The Israelite foremen saw that they were in a bad way, having to go back and tell their workers, "Not one brick short in your daily quota." And they left Pharaoh. They found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. The foreman said to them, "May God see what you've done and judge you. You made us stink before Pharaoh and his servants. You put a weapon in his hand that's going to kill us." Moses went back to God and said, "My master, why are you treating this people so badly? And why did you ever send me? From the moment I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, things have only gotten worse for this people. And rescue? Does this look like rescue to you?" Exodus chapter 6. God said to Moses, "Now you see what I'll do to Pharaoh. With a strong hand, he'll send them out free. With a strong hand, he'll drive them out of his land." God continued speaking to Moses, reassuring him, "I am God. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as the strong God, but by my name, God, meaning I am present, I was not known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the country in which they lived in as sojourners. But now I've heard the groaning of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians continue to enslave, and I remember my covenant. Therefore tell the Israelites, I am God. I will bring you out from under the cruel, hard labor of Egypt. I will rescue you from slavery. I will redeem you, intervening with great acts of judgment. I'll take you as my own people, and I'll be God to you. You'll know that I am God, your God, who brings you out from under the cruel labor of Egypt. I'll bring you into the land that I promised to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and give it to you as your own country. I am God." But when Moses delivered this message to the Israelites, they didn't even hear him. They were that beaten down in spirit by the harsh slave conditions. Then God said to Moses, "Go and speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he will release the Israelites from his land." Moses answered God, "Look, the Israelites won't even listen to me. How do you expect Pharaoh to? And besides, I stutter." But God again laid out the facts to Moses and Aaron regarding the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he again commanded them to lead the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. The family tree of Moses and Aaron. These are the heads of the tribes, the sons of Reuben, Israel's firstborn, Hanak, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. These are the families of Reuben. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Saul, the son of a Canaanite woman. These are the families of Simeon. These are the names of the sons of Levi in order of their birth, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Levi lived 137 years. The sons of Gershon by family, Libni and Shimei. The sons of Kohath, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uziel. Kohath lived to be 133. The sons of Merari, Mali and Mushi. These are the sons of Levi in the order of their birth. Amram married his aunt Jochebed, and she had Moses and Aaron. Amram lived to be 137. Amram married his aunt Jochebed. Okay. Learn something new every day. The sons of Izhar, Korah, Nepheg, and Zikri. The sons of Uziel, Mishael, Elzaphan, and Zithri. Aaron married Elisheba, the daughter of Amminadab, the sister of Nahshon, and she had Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. The sons of Korah, Aser, Elkanah, and Abisab. These are the families of the Korahites. Aaron's son Eleazar married one of the daughters of Putiel, and she had Phinehas. These are the heads of the Levite families, family by family. This is the Aaron and Moses whom God ordered. Bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, clan by clan. These are the men, Moses and Aaron, who told Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to release the Israelites from Egypt. I'll make you as a god to Pharaoh. And that's how things stood when God next spoke to Moses in Egypt. God addressed Moses saying, I am God. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I say to you. And Moses answered, look at me, I stutter. Why would Pharaoh listen to me? Exodus chapter 7. God told Moses, look at me. I'll make you as a god to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to speak everything I command you, and your brother Aaron will tell it to Pharaoh. Then he will release the Israelites from his land. At the same time, I'm going to put Pharaoh back up. At the same time, I'm going to put Pharaoh's back up and follow it up by filling Egypt with signs and wonders. Let's read that again. That sentence is not making sense. At the same time, I'm going to put Pharaoh's back up and follow it up by filling Egypt with signs and wonders. Okay. Pharaoh's not going to listen to you, but I will have my way against Egypt and bring out my soldiers, my people, the Israelites from Egypt by mighty acts of judgment. The Egyptians will realize that I am God when I step in and take the Israelites out of their country. Moses and Aaron did exactly what God commanded. Moses was 80 and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. Then God spoke to Moses and Aaron. He said, when Pharaoh speaks to you and says, prove yourself, perform a miracle, then tell Aaron, take your staff and throw it down in front of Pharaoh. It will turn into a snake. Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh and did what God commanded. Aaron threw down his staff in front of Pharaoh and his servants, and it turned into a snake. Pharaoh called in his wise men and sorcerers, the magicians. The magicians of Egypt did the same thing by their spells. Each man threw down his staff, and they all turned into snakes. But then Pharaoh's staff swallowed their staffs. Yet Pharaoh was as stubborn as ever. He wouldn't listen to them, just as God had said. Strike one, blood. God said to Moses, Pharaoh is a stubborn man. He refuses to release the people. First thing in the morning, go and meet Pharaoh as he goes down to the river. At the shore of the Nile, take the staff that turned into a snake and say to him, God, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you with this message. Release my people so they can worship me in the wilderness. So far, you haven't listened. This is how you know that I am God. I'm going to take this staff that I'm holding and strike this Nile River water. That water will turn to blood. The fish in the Nile will die, the Nile will stink, and the Egyptians won't be able to drink the Nile water. God said to Moses, tell Aaron, take your staff and wave it over the waters of Egypt, over its rivers, its canals, its ponds, all its bodies of water, so that they turn to blood. There'll be blood everywhere in Egypt, even in the pots and pans. Moses and Aaron did exactly as God commanded them. Aaron raised his staff and hit the water in the Nile with Pharaoh and his servants watching. All the water in the Nile turned into blood. The fish in the Nile died, the Nile stank, and the Egyptians couldn't drink the Nile water. The blood was everywhere in Egypt. But the magicians of Egypt did the same thing with their incantations. Still, Pharaoh remained stubborn. He wouldn't listen to them as God had said. He spun around and went home, never giving it a second thought. But all the Egyptians had to dig inland from the river for water because they couldn't drink the Nile water. Seven days went by after God had struck the Nile. The book of Exodus chapter 8. Strike 2, frogs. God said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and tell him God's message. Release my people so they can worship me. If you refuse to release them, I'm warning you. I'll hit the whole country with frogs. The Nile will swarm with frogs. They'll come up into the houses, into your bedrooms and into your beds, into your servants' quarters among the people, into your ovens and pots and pans. They'll be all over you, all over everyone. Frogs everywhere, on and in everything. God said to Moses, tell Aaron, wave your staff over the rivers and canals and ponds, bring up frogs on the land of Egypt. Aaron stretched his staff over the waters of Egypt, and a mob of frogs came up and covered the country. But again, the magicians did the same thing using their incantations. They also produced frogs in Egypt. Pharaoh called in Moses and Aaron and said, pray to God to rid us of these frogs. I'll release the people so that they can make their sacrifices and worship God. Moses said to Pharaoh, certainly, set the time. When you do want the frogs out of here, away from your servants and people and out of your houses, you'll be rid of the frogs everywhere. You'll be rid of the frogs except for those in the Nile. Make it tomorrow. Moses said, tomorrow it is. So you realize that there is no God like our God. The frogs will be gone, you and your houses and your servants and your people free of frogs. The only frogs left will be the ones in the Nile. Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh, and Moses prayed to God about the frogs he brought on Pharaoh. God responded to Moses' prayer. The frogs died off. Houses, courtyards, fields, all free of frogs. They piled the frogs in heaps. The country reeked of dead frogs. But when Pharaoh saw that he had some breathing room, he got stubborn again and wouldn't listen to Moses and Aaron, just as God had said. Strike 3, gnats. God said to Moses, tell Aaron, take your staff and strike the dust. The dust will turn into gnats all over Egypt. He did it. Aaron grabbed his staff and struck the dust of the earth. It turned into gnats. Gnats all over people and animals. All the dust of the earth turned into gnats. Gnats everywhere in Egypt. The magicians tried to produce gnats with their spells, but this time they couldn't do it. There were gnats everywhere, all over the people and animals. The magician said to Pharaoh, this is God's doing. But Pharaoh was stubborn and wouldn't listen, just as God had said. Strike 4, flies. God said to Moses, get up early in the morning and confront Pharaoh as he goes down to the water. Tell him, God's message, release my people so they can worship me. If you don't release my people, I'll release swarms of flies on you, your servants and your people and your homes. The houses of the Egyptians and even the ground under their feet will be thick with flies. But when it happens, I'll set Goshen, where my people live, aside as a sanctuary. No flies in Goshen. That will show that I am God in this land. No flies in Goshen. I'll make a sharp distinction between your people and mine. This sign will occur tomorrow. And God did just that. Thick swarms of flies in Pharaoh's palace and the houses of his servants, all over Egypt. The country was ruined by flies. Pharaoh called in Moses and Aaron and said, go ahead, sacrifice to your God, but do it here in this country. Moses said that would not be wise. What we sacrifice to our God would give great offense to the Egyptians. If we openly sacrifice what is so deeply offensive to the Egyptians, they'll kill us. Let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to our God just as he instructed us. Pharaoh said, all right, I'll release you to go and sacrifice to your God in the wilderness. Only don't go too far. Now pray for me. That old devil, tell me I pray for him. Moses said, as soon as I leave here, I will pray to God that tomorrow the flies will leave Pharaoh, his servants and his people. But don't play games with us and change your mind about releasing us to sacrifice to God. Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to God. God did what Moses asked. He got rid of the flies that Pharaoh and his servants and his people. There wasn't a fly left, but Pharaoh became stubborn once again and wouldn't release the people. Exodus 9, strike 5, animals. God said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and tell him, the God of the Hebrews says, release my people so that they can worship me. Good Kool-Aid. If you refuse to release them and continue to hold on to them, I'm giving you fair warning. God will come down hard on your livestock out in the fields, horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, striking them with a severe disease. God will draw a sharp line between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt. Not one animal that belongs to the Israelites will die. Then God set the time. Tomorrow, God will do this thing. And the next day, God did it. All the livestock of Egypt died, but not one animal of the Israelites died. Pharaoh sent men to find out what had happened, and there it was. None of the livestock of the Israelites had died, not one death. But Pharaoh stayed stubborn. He wouldn't release the people. Strike 6, boils. God said to Moses and Aaron, take fistfuls of soot from a furnace and have Moses throw it into the air right before Pharaoh's eyes. It will become a film of fine dust all over Egypt and cause sores. An eruption of boils, Lord, that sounds like hoodoo or something. An eruption of boils on people and animals throughout Egypt. So they took soot from a furnace, stood in front of Pharaoh, and threw it up into the air. That's voodoo. It caused boils to erupt on people and animals. The magicians weren't able to compete with Moses this time because of the boils. They were covered with boils just like everyone else in Egypt. God hardened Pharaoh in his stubbornness. He wouldn't listen, just as God had said to Moses. Strike 7, hail. God said to Moses, get up early in the morning and confront Pharaoh. Tell him, God, the God of the Hebrews, says, release my people so they can worship me. This time I'm going to strike you and your servants and your people with the full force of my power. So you'll get it into your head that there's no one like me anywhere in all the earth. You know that by now I could have struck you and your people with deadly disease, and there'd be nothing left of you, not a trace. But for one reason only, I've kept you on your feet, to make you recognize my power, that my reputation spreads in all the earth. You are still building yourself up at my people's expense. You're not letting them go. So here's what's going to happen. At this time tomorrow, I'm sending a terrific hailstorm. There's never been a storm like this in Egypt from the day of its founding until now. So get your livestock under roof. Everything exposed in the open fields, people and animals will die when the hail comes down. All of Pharaoh's servants who had respect for God's word got their workers and animals under cover as fast as they could, but those who didn't take God's word seriously left their workers and animals out in the field. God said to Moses, stretch out your hand to the sky, signal to the hail to fall all over Egypt on people and animals and crops exposed in the fields of Egypt. Moses lifted his staff to the skies, and God sent cracks of thunder and hail shot through with lightning strikes. God rained hail down on the land of Egypt. The hail came, hail and lightning, a fierce hailstorm. There had been nothing like it in Egypt in its entire history. The hail hit hard all over Egypt. Everything exposed out in the fields, people and animals and crops were smashed. Even the trees in the field were shattered. Except for Goshen, where the Israelites lived, there was no hail in Goshen. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. He said, I've sinned for sure this time. God is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. Pray to God. We've had enough of God's thunder and hail. I'll let you go. The sooner you're out of here, the better. Moses said, as soon as I'm out of the city, I'll stretch out my arms to God. The thunder will stop and the hail will end, so you'll know that the land is God's land. Still, I know that you and your servants have no respect for God. The flax and barley were ruined, for they were just ripening, but the wheat and spelt weren't hurt. They ripened later. Moses left Pharaoh and the city and stretched out his arms to God. The thunder and the hail stopped, and the storm cleared. But when Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail and thunder had stopped, he kept right on sinning, stubborn as ever, both he and his servants. Pharaoh's heart turned rock hard. He refused to release the Israelites as God had ordered through Moses. Exodus chapter 10, strike 8, locusts. God said to Moses, go to Pharaoh. I've made him stubborn. I've made him stubborn, him and his servants, so that I can force him to look at these signs. So you'll be able to tell your children and grandchildren how I toyed with the Egyptians like a cat with a mouse. You'll tell them stories of the signs that I brought down on them, so that you'll all know that I am God. Cat and mouse. Interesting. Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, God, the God of the Hebrews, says, how long are you going to refuse to knuckle under? Release my people so they can worship me. If you refuse to release my people, watch out. Tomorrow, I'm bringing locusts into your country. They'll cover every square inch of ground. No one will be able to see the ground. They'll devour everything left over from the hailstorm, even the saplings out in the fields. They'll clear cut the trees. They'll invade your homes, filling the houses of your servants, filling every house in Egypt. Nobody will ever have anything like this. Nobody will have ever seen anything like this from the time your ancestors first set foot on this soil until today. Then he turned on his heel and left Pharaoh. Pharaoh's servant said to him, how long are you going to let this man harass us? Let these people go and worship their God. Can't you see that Egypt is on its last legs? So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. He said to them, go ahead then, go worship your God. But just who exactly is going with you? Moses said, we're taking young and old, sons and daughters, flocks and herds. This is our worship celebration of God. He said, I'd sooner send you off with God's blessing than let you go with your children. Look, you're up to no good. It's written all over your faces. No way. Just the men are going. Go ahead and worship God. That's what you want so badly. And they were thrown out of Pharaoh's presence. God said to Moses, stretch your hand over Egypt and signal the locusts to cover the land of Egypt, devouring every blade of grass in the country, everything that the hail didn't get. Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt. God let loose an east wind. It blew that day and night. By morning, the east wind had brought in the locusts. The locusts covered the country of Egypt, settling over every square inch of Egypt. The place was thick with locusts. There never was an invasion of locusts like it in the past, never will be again. The ground was completely covered, black with locusts. They ate everything, every blade of grass, every piece of fruit, anything that the hail didn't get. Nothing left but bare trees and bare fields, not a sign of green in the whole land of Egypt. Pharaoh had Moses and Aaron back in no time. He said, I've sinned against your God and against you. Overlook my sin one more time. Pray to your God to get me out of this. Get death out of here. Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to God. God reversed the wind. A powerful west wind took the locusts and dumped them into the Red Sea. There wasn't a single locust left in the whole country of Egypt. But God made Pharaoh stubborn as ever. He still didn't release the Israelites. Strike 9, darkness. God said to Moses, stretch out your hand to the skies. Let darkness descend on the land of Egypt. A darkness so dark you can touch it. Moses stretched out his hand to the skies. Thick darkness descended on the land of Egypt for 3 days. Nobody could see anybody. For 3 days, no one could so much as move except for the Israelites. They had light where they were living. Pharaoh called in Moses. Go and worship God. Leave your flocks and herds behind, but go ahead and take your children. But Moses said, you have to let us take our sacrificial animals and offerings with us so we can sacrifice them and worship to our God. Our livestock has to go with us, not a hoof left behind. They are part of the worship of our God. And we don't know just what will be needed when we get there. But God kept Pharaoh stubborn as ever. He wouldn't agree to release them. Pharaoh said to Moses, get out of my sight and watch your step. I don't want to ever see you again. If I lay eyes on you again, you're dead. Moses said, have it your way. You won't see my face again. This is the word of the Lord. Boy, that got heated.